welcome to 20 Questions, Episode 6. Today our guest is Ben Bradshaw. Ben Bradshaw is the Labour MP for Exeter. He has held this post since 1997. Between the dates of 2009 and 2010, he was the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. Before entering politics, he was a BBC radio presenter. Hi Ben, can you tell us a little bit more about your time as Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sports?
Yes, hello. Well, it was the last year of the Labour government between 2009 and 2010 under Gordon Brown as Prime Minister. So a lot of it was dealt with finishing up unfinished business in those last few months before the election and getting ready for the general election. But it was an area, media and sport, that I've been interested in for a long time, and it was a huge privilege for me to serve as a cabinet minister after 9 years as a junior minister in that Labour government.
Please tell us about what being an MP consists of.
Oh, well, it consists of lots of different things. I mean, obviously, when Parliament is sitting during the week, MPs have a very important job to represent their constituents here in Parliament at Westminster, in making sure, in my case, that Exeter's voice is heard and that the government is listening to Exeter and what my constituents are concerned about and what they need. A very important job of work to do to hold the government to account when it makes laws, to try to ensure that they don't impact adversely on our constituents. And then, of course, the job in the constituency is also very important on days when Parliament isn't sitting, which tends to be Fridays and the weekends, when we hold our surgeries and constituents can come and see us if they need our help with something. I visit schools, factories, workplaces, hold events, go out door to door, knocking on doors of constituents in Exeter to see if there are issues or concerns that I can help them with. So it's a combination of trying to do your best to help your constituents in your constituency and making sure the interests of your constituency are looked after in Parliament where the important decisions are made.
What is your favourite thing about being a Member of Parliament?
Well, I think the favourite thing is when I walk down the street in Exeter and somebody comes up to me and says that I or one of my members of staff help them with a problem. And to you or to somebody else, it may seem like a small problem if they've been overcharged on a bill or if they've had problems getting their benefits. But to them, it can make the difference between being able to turn the heating on at night and put a meal on the table for their family. So, that still gives me a real buzz when someone says that I've helped them in that way. And it's a huge privilege to be in a position where you can open doors for people and help people cut through bureaucratic nightmares.
What is the funniest thing that has ever happened in Parliament when you were there?
Well, I think the funniest thing in hindsight, although at the time it didn't feel very funny, was when the very fierce female speaker, Betty Boothroyd, soon after I was appointed, hauled me into her office to tell me off for taking my shoes off in the chamber. And the reason I'd done that is because I cycle to and from Parliament every day, as you may know, and it had been a torrential downpour, and it was winter time, very cold, and my feet, I was not only wet but very cold, and I took my shoes off to allow my socks to dry out a little bit. I mean, nobody could see this was completely invisible, but apparently one of the Conservative MPs snitched on me and told the Speaker and complained, and because he complained, she had to haul me in and tell me off. And the reason I thought it was very funny and ironic is because Betty Boothroyd herself was well known when she sat in the Speaker's chair for constantly kicking her shoes off. She was almost always shoeless. So anyway, I thought it was one rule for the Speaker and one rule for the backbench MP.
What is your all-time favourite parliamentary moment?
Oh, I think probably my all-time favourite parliamentary moment will have to be Tony Blair's final Prime Minister's Question Time. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend you doing it. I mean, this was at the end of his 10 years as Prime Minister, a hugely successful period in our country's history and in Labour politics. He was at the height of his powers. He put in a commanding performance at Prime Minister's Questions, He ended with a very funny joke against one of our Southwest Liberal Democrat MPs, as was Ben, and the whole House stood up and gave him a standing ovation on all sides of the House, and I think that would have to be my favourite parliamentary moment.
What was it like being on Gordon Brown's cabinet?
Well, it was fascinating and interesting and motivating. I mean, we were having to deal at the time, you may remember, with the aftermath of the global financial crash in 2008. There was still a war going on in Afghanistan, the aftermath of the military conflict in Iraq. We had major floods during that time when Gordon was Prime Minister. And we were facing an imminent election, which was going to be very difficult for the Labour Party. So there was a lot to do. We did a lot got done. I still consider it a huge privilege to have been at the centre of government at such an important and critical time to our country. People have forgotten the role that Gordon Brown played after the global financial crash, and many people, perhaps not in this country, but certainly around the world, credit Gordon with having done more than any other single individual, having prevented a complete collapse in the global financial system. And that was what he was doing in that year, and we were all collectively supporting him.
Who do you like to sit with in Parliament, and why?
Well, of course, we only sit with our own fellow party MPs, and I tend to sit in the same place at the moment now, 3 rows back, just behind the dispatch box, and you tend to get the same people who sit in a similar place. It seems to be a favourite place for former cabinet members like me and other former ministers. But obviously in select committee meetings, where we do a lot of our work, the parties can be mixed up, and I often sit next to Conservatives and Liberal Democrats or even SNP if they're on my committee. It doesn't really bother me who I sit near, to be perfectly honest, because you're not really having a lot of chit-chat or gossip during these meetings or hearings. You're taking part in the debate, and you're focused on what's being discussed in the room rather than on what some little bits and pieces of gossip you may be having with your neighbour.
Why did you choose to be an MP?
Well, as you said in your introduction, I haven't always been a politician. I started my working life as a journalist in Exeter on the local paper, and then worked for the BBC and travelled the world as a BBC correspondent. But then in the mid-90s, the Labour Party in Exeter were looking for a candidate to stand in the 1997 general election, and a couple of old friends of mine in Exeter suggested that I should put my name forward, and I did, and I got selected. And I think the attraction for me then was, first of all, the prospect after 18 years of Conservative government that at last we would have a Labour government that would make a positive difference to the country, and the prospect of being involved as part of that government, making these changes, making things happen, rather than being somebody on the outside just commenting on them.
Do you look up to any people who are or were in Parliament?
Yes, I mean, there are certainly people in Parliament still and in the past for whom I have the utmost respect and admiration, either for what they've achieved, not necessarily in positions of power as ministers, but often as dogged backbenchers pursuing particular causes. But obviously, as a Labour MP who believes that politics is all about what you can do to change the world and improve it for the better, I'm interested in Labour governments. And, for me, having had the opportunity to serve the most successful Labour leader and Prime Minister in our history, Tony Blair, I think would have to make him the person that if I was to choose one, I would say he would be it.
What is your parliamentary routine?
Well, there's no such thing as a daily routine. That's the interesting and the strange thing about being an MP. No 2 days are the same, because today, for example, I've been doing a lot of interviews and debates because of the flooding and the disruption yet again to the railway line in Devon. So although you can have a sort of basic framework of a timetable, it's often thrown awry by things that happen from one minute to the next. But essentially, my parliamentary routine is Monday to Thursday in Parliament, while Parliament is sitting, taking part in debates, attending select committee meetings, responding to hundreds of emails and letters I get every week, talking to the media, asking questions. But as I say, no 2 days are the same, and often your plans will change and have to change from one minute to the next.
Now on to our 10 set questions, which we ask everybody who joins us on 20 questions. What is your favourite piece of music?
Well, I think if I was going to have to choose one piece of music to take to a desert island, which is perhaps not necessarily my favourite piece of music, but the piece of music I would take to the desert island, it would probably have to be something like Bob Marley, maybe One Love, or something that I could sing along to and dance to and also made me feel happy.
If you could invite 3 people, dead or alive, to a dinner party, who would you choose and why?
Well, this might sound strange, but I would actually invite some of my best and closest friends, who thankfully are still alive, because one of the things about being an MP is you don't have enough time to see your friends and family. So it wouldn't be anyone well-known or famous or anyone from the past, because the thing I value more than anything else doing the job I do is having time to see my friends, and it would be my 3 best old friends.
What is your favourite piece of literature and why?
Well, again, I think if I had to take one book to a desert island, it would be Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, because I love Hardy. I think his writing about the English countryside and the society at the time is incredibly moving and vivid and pictorial, and I think that he also writes great stories and great dramatic stories, and of course Tess is probably the greatest and the most dramatic of them all, and yes, I think that would probably be my book.
What is your favourite place and why?
My favourite place? Well, I can think of lots of public places which I really love. I mean, I think Exeter Cathedral Green is a beautiful place, sadly recently scarred by the fire, which we hope it will recover from. But I think if I was to say where am I happiest and what I most likely to be, it goes back to what I said earlier about who I'd want to have for dinner. I think my favourite place is in my kitchen, because I love cooking and I like preparing food and I like having nice meals with family and friends, and I don't have enough time to do that. So I notice that whenever I come back to my own home and my own kitchen, I think, oh, isn't this nice? And so at the moment, as things stand, it's my kitchen half.
What is your favourite piece of art and why?
Can I? Oh, no, I suppose I've already had a piece of music, haven't I? So you're talking about a piece of fine art.
Yes.
A picture.
Yes.
Or a statue or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think probably. I think it would have to be the Risen Christ, because I think the painting, in its simplicity and symbolism of a critical depiction of an event that's so important for our culture and so beautiful, and symbolises the Italian Renaissance, which I also love very much would have to be the picture.
What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
The best piece of advice I've ever been given. I think the best piece of advice that I've ever been given, and if I haven't been given it, is the best piece of advice I would have wanted to be given, is to be true to yourself and do what you think is right, and not something because you think somebody else wants you to do it. And do your best as well. I think if you have those two things, do your best and be true to yourself, you'll go through life, well.
If you weren't a Member of Parliament, what do you think you would be?
Well, I suppose I might still be a journalist because that's what I did before I went into politics, or I might do something completely different. I sometimes think now that if I had lost my seat at the last election, or I may indeed lose it to the next election, that I'd go off and do something completely different, like train to be a yoga teacher. I practice yoga and I'd like very much to get better, and who knows, maybe I have a new life as a yoga teacher somewhere.
What do you think your greatest achievement has been?
Well, I don't think there's a single thing that I would highlight, although of course this wasn't an achievement, but it was something that was made possible by the Labour government, that I was the first politician to enter into a civil partnership with the same-sex partner, which was an historic event. But I think I would have to say that overall, what Exeter has achieved in the last 20 years is the thing that I'm most proud of, because Exeter as a city has done really well over the last couple of decades, and that hasn't happened by accident. It hasn't just been about what I've done or any one individual has done, but it's been a great team effort by a number of people of which I've been part. And if politics is to mean anything, that's the kind of thing it should mean.
What do you love doing the most?
Well, I think I love the most. It's probably walking in beautiful nature. Walking and swimming in beautiful nature is still the thing I love doing the most, and possibly even more these days, given that I don't have very much time to do it.
Do you have a hobby or secret talent?
I don't really have time for hobbies, although, as I said earlier, I do like cooking, and I don't get enough time to cook. And my secret talent is I can whistle very well and very loudly, but I don't do much whistling because my husband doesn't like it.
Thank you for joining us on 20 Questions.
Thank you very much for your wonderful questions. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.